And it's all about just getting really good at, if you mess up, then you just come in and say, hey, I messed up. I'm so sorry. And here's how I'm going to do better. And here's what I maybe would have rather said, and what I should have said. And here's how we're going to do that moving forward. Because then and then you actually do it, right? Because then it's about retraining your brain. Because you said something earlier, and I want to bring like attention back to it, of you have no, like, there's no one really to like check you, but
Yeah.
we have to be good at checking ourselves.
Yep.
And that took me a really long time to like get comfortable with, was like changing my own language. But I had to do it not even just like before I got really good at it on the internet, I had to get really good at it in real life.
Yep.
Because the more I got good at it in real life, the easier it was to be on the internet, where you're going to see anything and everything. And then it's easy to go, like, instead of something like, hey, ladies, it's going to go, hey, everyone. You're not going to have that weird, like, feeling like, hey, she and theys, because in reality, you're not going to call someone a they, right? You're
Yep.
going to be able to call everyone, hey, friends, hey, people, like, whatever. It's much easier to have that inclusive language, to say I support women, and women means all women,
Yep.
like, whatever that means to you. It's very easy usually, but you have to get comfortable with checking yourself versus needing someone to check you.
Yeah, and I'm noticing now using people more or clients more, but I
Yeah,
do know that I still fuck up with that. Like I fuck up, and the hey ladies thing is something that's so natural to me, and like hey ladies, but also like from a strategic point, like when did I decide that my business had to be just placed in a box to women? Because yes, I want to serve women, and there's a reason behind that because I think there isn't enough safe spaces for women out there to access themselves and access the energy and the emotional, but also there isn't enough of those spaces for men, for non-binary, for people who don't identify in those categories. And I think maybe it was language online that steered me a little bit into the, oh, this is who I'm speaking to, because we see a lot of female-led businesses now speaking to women. But again, that's limiting our potential in business because if you understand mind development, if you understand your craft, if you understand how to be of service, that doesn't matter who the person is.
exactly. And I full on believe that a big portion of it is because of where a lot of the online space went. And I would I would 1000% say, especially in the coaching industry, I think it had to do a lot with the fact that there were a lot of larger coaches who tried very hard to be like the female Gary V. And because of that, they went to, because Gary V talks, and I don't listen to him very often because I don't consume very much. Like, just in general, I don't consume a lot. But he talks a lot about just people and everybody. And like, it's very easy. But then when women tend to, and this is not a generalization, this is like what I've observed. What I've noticed is women tend to go, ooh, now let's take that and flip it for like female empowerment,
Yeah.
feminism, things like that. But
Ooh.
what they do is put it towards white feminism. And there's a really great book, if anyone's ever interested in reading it, highly recommend. I think I have like one of the most liked reviews on Amazon for some reason, called Hood Feminism, about how white feminism kind of overtook the feminist movement in general and left out Black people. Really, really good book, by the way. But it that's kind of how a lot of that went to, like, very women led, like, our businesses should only be talking to women, but then it was only talking to a certain type of woman. And it goes back to that kind of like checklist of, if you have feminine energy, if you are like waking up every day and bathing in sunflowers, and like if you're doing like all of these things, and it doesn't resonate with a lot of people, and then they wonder why, and then it's like, but you're leaving out so many cool people, and it sucks, right?
And I felt that probably on a completely different scale because I can't compare myself to others, right? But I felt even in the online space of, well, I don't belong in here because I'm a little bit more rugged around the edges and my build's a little bit different and, I'm not as curated. And so it does have an impact. I've not bought from people who I love listening to them, but if they're on camera, I'm like, I just cannot. Not from a place of anything other than it comes across so curated that I don't feel relatable to that. I don't feel like I'm held in that space. I feel like if I don't fit in this mold, then I don't belong here. And I've been in spaces where I've felt isolated. I've been in environments where I'm like, this is toxic as fuck. Like, I want to feel valued in the presence of this community. And I don't because I'm not coming across in that curated way. And so you're not seeing me as equally as valuable. And so I had to get to a point of, okay, why do I take a step back and create something of my own? But again, even creating something of my own, like it doesn't just end there because the Misfits is meant to bring people together. But ultimately, am I even doing that at the highest possible degree?
Exactly. And honestly, I think we all question that. And I think that's a normal question, right? And I think that's where, like, the more we dive into these conversations and inclusivity and accessibility in general, it's easier. It's never going to be easy, in my opinion, but it does get a lot easier because a lot of this at this point is second nature to me, that I can say it's easier, to where it it makes it feel like it's not as daunting. Because I would be lying to say that it doesn't feel daunting at first.
Oh
It
my
doesn't
God,
feel
my
like
heart
it's
earlier, I said something and I was like, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have worded that like that. And then you're like, holy fuck, like, what did I do?
That's honestly, I still have those days sometimes. And especially if I'm interacting with like certain people. And like that story I told earlier about like the creator I had the interaction with, like I had the same thought. I was like sending messages and I was like, oh God, like, is this correct? Should I be talking about it this way? Oh God. When in reality, like I know. And I knew that I was standing up for the correct reasons and speaking about it in the correct way. Because then I wake up the next morning and I get a message that says, I've been binging your podcast all morning. I just wanted to let you know. And I was like, of course you have. Because I told you, like, you don't need me to do free labor to find you free resources because I am the free resource. Like,
Mm.
of course you've been listening to my podcast, but you still have that moment of, oh God, did I say the wrong thing? Because it's not, I don't want to say it's not natural because it should be natural, but because like we come from places to where it's not natural, which sucks, you have to make it natural.
Yes. And I think looking at that, nobody ever sat down and educated me on racism. I think it's such a strong subject that it scares people, right? And so even as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about my family dynamics and the world that I've been brought into. And it's like, if you don't discuss it, then you're not a racist because we're not actively doing anything wrong. But not speaking up is part of the problem. And so when I went to college, I remember the one thing our teacher saying is the things we don't discuss with our clients are politics, race, all of the shebang, right? And I'm not sure I agree with this because, like, when I have a strong view of something, I have a strong view of something. And I feel, and I had a debate on social media. In fact, I've had quite a few the last year with just people that I'm like, this makes no fucking sense. For example, the wars that the world has been going through, and someone's like, you don't have to speak up about it. And I'm like, yeah, but not speaking up is part of the problem. Like, we need to see where do you stand. And yes, that's your view. And I'm not saying don't have your view, but it turns me off when I see creators in the midst of war just creating these perfectly curated pictures and not having conversations that I feel we have a responsibility to share. Because yes, we're still educating ourselves, but I do feel like there's a responsibility there. At the end of the day, if you're in business and you're public, you're a role model. And so you have a responsibility, and you as a leader have to step into those shoes. And she was like, everybody reacts in different ways. And so staying silent is a response for some people. And I was like, well, some people don't have that choice to stay silent. Like, some people don't have that luxury. And then again, I've had the conversation with somebody who it was, I think you saw this actually. It was about a like $33 offer. And she was like, I'm stepping into my next level leadership. Like, if anybody buys a $33 offer, then they're not playing in their leadership. And I was like, one of my first investments was probably about $7 in myself because that's all I could afford at that time. I was in debt, I was struggling, I didn't have the money mindset or the capability to invest anymore. But you invest at the level that's good for you. And so, what is your view of people, one, sharing blanket statements on social media, which I've probably been guilty of in the past as well, but I've had to educate myself on. But then two, like just not saying anything.
Silence is complicit, is my like one of my fundamental mantras, because I 1000%, like, as someone who, number one, has been pretty heavily in the like public policy space that I'm in, you don't really get a choice. If you want change, if you want like to have any sort of platform that is respected for a long period of time, you don't really have a choice. And we see that a lot. It's funny because you can actually see it very heavily with, ironically, with Taylor Swift's whatchamacallit, her endorsement lately, right? And for anyone who missed it, she endorsed who she thought the next president of the United States should be. I'm not here to talk about that part. I like that is exciting for her and all of the Swifties. If anyone's looking behind me right now, you're going to clearly see what I think. But it is it is so interesting to watch when people choose to stay silent. Because if you look at who chooses to stay silent and you look at